School officials in North Carolina are apologizing after fourth graders at Waxhaw Elementary School were given an assignment where they were asked to imagine what people would post on Twitter if the platform existed during the Civil War. Now, the results of this were not at all surprising, although people are surprised. Now, whoever came up with this idea, it's a bad idea generally because it's going to lead to bad takes. Because here's the thing, not only is Twitter a dumpster fire today, imagine back then it would be an absolute worst dumpster fire. Again, you don't even have to imagine how bad it would be because we have an example of how bad it could get. Now, speaking to the Charlotte Observer, Union County NAACP member Kimberly Morrison Hansley said the results should be disturbing to anyone. The tweets that were displayed in the school's hallway ended up being all pro-slavery. Again, maybe it's because the students imagined that everybody was going to be pro-slavery back then, which says something. And what it says is generally not good. Now, these tweets were also displayed publicly on the school's Facebook page. So they took these tweets and they plastered them all over the hallway. That's problematic. And also on Facebook, also problematic. Now, I don't know, maybe it was a whole thing of like, hey, look, this is what it would be like back then. Okay, but you're again showing like this is sort of the equivalent today of saying, okay, well, what's Parler like? Let's just post posts from Parler as a study. Not a good idea, because you're going to end up with Nazis. Because that's essentially a lot of people on Parler, white nationalists. What age group? Fourth graders. It's fairly young. Now, as you can see from this, I don't even want to say the tweet, but there it is. It's pretty bad. It's just pretty bad. All right. Ironically, though, it does kind of prove a couple of different points. For one, Twitter is as awful as we imagine it would be, no matter what. No matter what era something like social media would be, the loudest, worst voices tend to get amplified the most. And it also demonstrates how racism is pretty inherent in American culture and has been for the beginning of America. And so that's something that, of course, makes conservatives' heads explode when you say something like that. Like, hey, I guess it turns out this country is built on the backs of enslaved African Americans. There's no bones about it. It's absolutely true. And the only thing that we can do now is recognize that this is the case, move on from it by making sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. And that's the thing. We have to make sure not to repeat the mistakes of the past. But again, the fact that kids immediately posted this complete and utter horrible racistness, that's not a word, racist horribleness is a great example of the racism endemic in our society. I mean, look, I would expect if you're going to do something like this, which I strongly advise that you don't, maybe use this as an example. It's like, hey, this is like the worst part. But then, of course, you have abolitionists and you have civil rights leaders and things like that that are pushing. No, they don't push any of those. They didn't think of any of those people. And that's really bad because it really shows a failure of education on the subject. Now, as a result, the outrage is absolutely real. Outraged parents sent letters to school officials about this, understandably so. Parent Brittany Buford told WCNC Charlotte that it wasn't surprising that racism and institutional racism continues to rear its ugly head in that community. Quote, there's nothing else to call it. There's no second side to this coin. Racism is racism. True. Superintendent Andrew Holohan agreed, calling the assignment, quote, racially insensitive and not appropriate. Quote, I want to be clear. Any type of assignment such as this is unacceptable. We are taking this matter very seriously and will ensure this doesn't happen again. Union County Schools has also since apologized and said in a statement that the assignment was unacceptable. We apologize for offending parents, staff, students, and members of our community, the statement said, adding that district administrators are taking this matter very seriously and met with the entire Waxhaw elementary staff. So now maybe you're going to disagree with my take on this of going forward, but I think that this might be able to use as a learning experience. Now hear me out, and maybe I'm wrong. You can cancel me if you want. But I think people should use this as an illustration of why this is racism and why that tweets like this or statements like this are wrong, and slavery wrong. Because here's the thing, right? I've seen stories of, places that have revised their quote unquote revised their history books, right? To make to make slavery sound not so bad, right? Oh no, they were helpers, but they were unpaid helpers. And, they were getting taken care of by the benevolent white man, even though they wouldn't actually literally say that. But it would imply, right? That the slaves were better off. And you see this in conservative, rhetoric, about this. Oh, well, I know it was a bad institution, but they were better off in America than they were in Africa, weren't they? No, they weren't. You literally stole them from their homes and put them in chains. That is not better. That is actually worse. And so this should be used as an example, a teaching example, perhaps, of why this was wrong, and pointing out that a lot of the education around this, it has not been thorough enough, right? Slave owners and Confederates should not be glorified, and maybe put that in help them connect this into the modern day context of why people are outraged at, some of the old school names and, Confederate statues and things like that. So people would actually understand. Okay. I think it would be, if you do it right, a good learning experience, a teaching experience, because obviously these kids apparently need to understand why this was wrong. Okay. And I hope they do try to focus on the why. My concern is that they're going to maybe do a cursory punishment for the teacher and then bury the whole thing. And these kids might never really learn why what they did was controversial or wrong. And so that's what I'm concerned about. I want people to know. I want the younger generations to know the horribleness of slavery, and why people get so offended, why people are so up in arms about this, and why they're wanting to take down, mentions of the Confederacy, so that people have a proper context growing up, and so that no one will both forget it or make any sort of light of it, because this is a stain on our history, and it's one that shouldn't be forgotten. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.